You can lie to society. You can even lie to yourself. But there's one thing you can never lie to: your inner voice. And once you betray it, nothing outside will ever feel right again. Have you ever done everything right according to everyone else, yet felt completely wrong inside? Carl Jung's student Marie-Louise von Franz spent decades studying fairy tales from every culture on Earth. She discovered something haunting. Every moral rule in these stories had its opposite somewhere else. Steal, sometimes justified. Lie, often necessary. Kill. Even the heroes did it. But there was one rule that never changed. Never in any culture, in any story. Never harm a helpful animal. This isn't about actual animals. The helpful animal is a symbol. It represents that quiet voice inside you, your moral intuition, your true conscience, the part of you that knows what's authentic. And when you ignore it, when you silence it, when you betray it for approval or safety, the fairy tales all say the same thing. You lose your way. You wander in darkness, and no external success can save you from the internal wasteland you've created. Let me tell you about Emma. She's 32, successful marketing director, everyone's favorite colleague. She says yes to every project, volunteers for committees, never complains. Her LinkedIn profile is perfect. Her performance reviews are glowing. But every night at 3 a.m., she lies awake with a knot in her stomach that won't go away. Because Emma knows something her coworkers don't. She knows she's living a lie. Not a dramatic lie. A quiet one. The kind where you smile when you want to scream. Where you nod when you want to walk away. Where you become so good at being what others need that you forget what you actually are. Emma's helpful animal, her inner voice, has been whispering for months. This job is killing your soul. These people don't see you. You're becoming a ghost of yourself. But Emma keeps shoving that voice down deeper and deeper, because listening to it would mean what? Disappointing people, looking ungrateful, seeming unstable. This is the Carl Jung shadow at work, not the evil parts of ourselves, but the authentic parts we've buried because they don't fit the image we need to maintain. Jung discovered that we all wear a persona, a mask we show the world, and the more perfect that mask becomes, the more we lose touch with what's real underneath. The helpful animal gets weaker. The inner voice gets quieter, until one day you realize you've become a stranger to yourself. The terrifying truth. Most people would rather live as a successful stranger than risk being an authentic nobody. But here's what Jung understood, that most people don't. When you harm your helpful animal, when you betray your inner voice, the punishment doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. It's not about karma or cosmic justice. It's about psychological fracture. You become divided against yourself. Part of you knows you're living wrong, while another part desperately maintains that everything is fine. This internal war is exhausting. It creates anxiety that has no name, depression that makes no sense, and a haunting feeling that you're living someone else's life. Emma feels this every day. She's successful by every external measure, yet she feels like a fraud. Not because she's incompetent, but because she's competent at being someone she's not. Jung wrote, "Conscience commands the individual to obey his inner voice, even at the risk of going astray." Even at the risk of going astray. This is the most terrifying and liberating sentence ever written about human consciousness. Because what Jung is saying is this: your true conscience, your helpful animal, might lead you into uncertainty. It might make you unpopular. It might disrupt your carefully constructed life. But following it is still more important than following any external rule, any social expectation, any collective moral code. Why? Because there are two types of conscience, and most people can't tell them apart. False conscience is what you inherited from your parents, your culture, your religion, your social media feed. It's the voice that says, good people do this, and bad people do that. It's rigid, judgmental, and often hypocritical. It creates shame, not growth. It operates through fear, fear of judgment, fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough. False conscience sounds urgent and panicked. It uses words like should, must, always, and never. It compares you to others constantly and finds you lacking. It promises safety in exchange for conformity, but delivers only the appearance of safety while slowly suffocating your soul. True conscience is something else entirely. It's the quiet knowing that emerges from your deepest self. It doesn't shout. It doesn't judge. It simply knows. And it cares more about your authentic wholeness than your social acceptability. True conscience feels like coming home to yourself. It has the quality of recognition, not of learning something new, but of remembering something you always knew, but forgot. It speaks in your own voice, not in the borrowed voices of authority figures or cultural programming. Here's the devastating truth. Most people think they're following their conscience when they're actually following their conditioning. Take David, 41, married for 15 years. Everyone says he's a great husband. He provides, he's faithful. He shows up to family events. His wife posts photos of them looking happy. His friends admire their stability. By every social metric, David is winning at marriage. But David's helpful animal has been dying for years because David hasn't been honest, not with his wife, not with himself, about who he's becoming. He's changed. His interests have shifted from sports and career advancement to philosophy and art. His values have deepened from achieving success to finding meaning. His soul has evolved, but his marriage is still based on who he was at 26. He's not having an affair. He's not being cruel or neglectful, but he's committing a different kind of betrayal, the betrayal of authenticity. He's performing a version of himself that no longer exists, and both he and his wife can feel the falseness, even if neither speaks of it. His true conscience whispers, "Tell her who you really are now. Share your real thoughts, your evolving dreams, your changing needs. Have the hard conversations. Let the relationship evolve, or let it end honestly." But his false conscience screams louder. Good husbands don't change. Good husbands don't make waves. Good husbands sacrifice themselves for stability. What if she leaves? What if you destroy everything you've built? So David stays silent, and every day a little more of his authentic self dies. He buys her flowers on the expected days, says the right things at dinner parties, maintains the facade of contentment. But inside, he's disappearing. And the cruelest part is that his wife senses this absence too. She knows something is missing, but she can't name what it is, because David won't admit it exists. This is what Jung meant by the Carl Jung shadow, not just our dark impulses, but all the parts of ourselves we've rejected to maintain our persona. David's shadow contains not evil, but truth. His love of poetry that his friends would find impractical. His need for solitude that his wife might interpret as rejection. His questioning of the life path he chose before he knew who he really was. David's shadow holds his own evolution, and by rejecting it, he's rejecting his own growth. He's staying loyal to a version of himself that he's outgrown and calling this loyalty love. But Jung would ask, what kind of love requires you to betray yourself? What kind of commitment asks you to stop becoming who you're meant to be? The cost of harming your helpful animal isn't immediate. It's cumulative. It's the slow death of everything that makes you, you. David wakes up some mornings and doesn't recognize the man in the mirror. Not because he's aged, but because he's faded. The light in his eyes has dimmed. His laugh sounds hollow even to himself. He's successful, married, stable, and utterly lost. And here's the cruelest irony: David thinks he's being moral by staying silent. He thinks he's protecting his wife, his marriage, his family's stability. But what he's actually doing is building his life on a foundation of lies. And eventually, that foundation will crack. Because here's what David doesn't understand yet. His wife fell in love with a person, not a performance. And the more he performs, the less of that person she gets to love. His silence isn't protecting their marriage, it's slowly suffocating it. Jung understood something that modern psychology often misses. The psyche has its own moral laws. And the first law is this: you cannot betray your authentic self without consequences. Not cosmic consequences, psychological ones. When you consistently ignore your inner voice, you develop what Jung called a complex, an autonomous part of the psyche that operates independently of your conscious will. The repressed authentic self doesn't disappear. It goes underground. And from there it creates symptoms: anxiety, depression, rage, emptiness, addiction, obsession, affairs, workaholism, perfectionism. These aren't character flaws. These aren't mental illnesses. They're soul sicknesses. They're your psyche's way of saying, you're living wrong. Come home to yourself. David's depression doesn't come from a chemical imbalance. It comes from a spiritual one. He's out of alignment with his own truth, and no antidepressant can fix that. Only authenticity can. Jung spent his life studying what happens when people ignore their inner voice for too long. He found that the psyche will create increasingly dramatic symptoms to get our attention. First comes anxiety, the soul's whisper. Then depression, the soul's plea. Then comes what Jung called the dark night of the soul, when the false self begins to collapse and the real self demands to be born. This isn't pathology, it's psychology. It's the natural result of living out of integrity with your own deepest knowing. The question is, will you listen to the whisper or wait for the earthquake? So, why don't we listen? Why do we harm our helpful animal over and over, even when we know the cost? Because listening requires the one thing our culture has taught us to fear more than death being misunderstood. Following your inner voice means you might have to say no when everyone expects yes. You might have to choose growth over comfort, truth over peace, authenticity over approval. You might have to disappoint people who matter to you. You might have to admit you were wrong about who you thought you were supposed to be. And in a world that values consistency above growth, that's terrifying. But Jung had a different perspective. He believed that psychological maturity wasn't about becoming more rigid, more predictable, more socially acceptable. It was about becoming more whole. And wholeness requires integrating your shadow, including the authentic parts of yourself you've been hiding. This is where the real work begins. Not in thinking about your shadow, but in facing it. Not in understanding your inner voice intellectually, but in feeling it, trusting it, following where it leads. Laurens van der Post, who worked closely with Jung, wrote, "This contract with life is kept by a voice we call conscience, and no man can break it and ever know peace again." A contract with life, not with society, not with your parents, not with your spouse or your boss or your Instagram followers, with life itself. with the force that created you as a unique individual, not as a copy of someone else's expectations. This contract demands everything from you. It asks you to be yourself fully and completely, even when being yourself is inconvenient, unpopular, or misunderstood. Especially then. Emma finally listened to her helpful animal on a Tuesday morning in March. She was sitting in another meaningless meeting, watching her colleagues discuss strategies she knew wouldn't work for products she didn't believe in, for a company that saw her as replaceable. And her inner voice spoke so clearly it was like a bell ringing in her chest. This is not your life. The clarity was shocking. After months of whispers, suddenly her conscience spoke with absolute certainty. Not with anger or desperation, but with the calm authority of truth finally being acknowledged. She didn't quit that day. That would have been dramatic, and Emma's true conscience wasn't dramatic. It was practical. It understood that sustainable change happens gradually, that authenticity isn't about grand gestures, but about consistent, small choices aligned with your deepest knowing. Instead, she started making what Jung would call active imagination, decisions that honored her inner reality rather than her outer persona. She stopped volunteering for projects that drained her soul just to appear eager. She started speaking honestly in meetings, even when her opinions were unpopular. She began exploring what she actually wanted to do with her life, not what she thought she should want. This is terrifying work, because when you start living authentically, you discover that many of your relationships were based on your persona, not your person. People who loved your agreeableness might not love your boundaries. People who appreciated your availability might resent your selectivity. Emma's coworkers noticed the change immediately. Some of them didn't like it. Emma wasn't as agreeable anymore. She wasn't as available. She had opinions now, and preferences, and the audacity to express them. She had boundaries, and she maintained them even when it made things awkward. But there was something else too, something her coworkers couldn't name but could feel. Emma had presence now. She was actually there in her own life instead of performing someone else's. The word presence comes from the Latin presentia, meaning being before, or being in front of. When you're living from your true conscience, from your authentic self, you're present in a way that's unmistakable. You're not hiding behind your persona or lost in your performance. You're right there, real and whole and undeniably yourself. People sense this quality even if they can't articulate it. It's magnetic and unsettling at the same time. Magnetic because authenticity is rare and beautiful. Unsettling because it highlights the ways others might be hiding from themselves. Did Emma lose some relationships? Yes. Did some people think she was selfish? Absolutely. But for the first time in years, Emma could sleep through the night because she wasn't at war with herself anymore. The Carl Jung shadow work isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. And wholeness includes the parts of you that don't fit the parts that are inconvenient, the parts that make other people uncomfortable. This is what Jung meant when he talked about individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you actually are, rather than who you think you should be. It's not a destination you reach, but a direction you commit to. It's not about finding yourself once and for all, but about choosing yourself over and over, even when that choice is difficult. The word individuation literally means becoming undivided. When you honor your helpful animal, when you follow your inner voice, you begin to heal the split between who you are and who you pretend to be. You become integrated, whole, authentic. And here's what Emma discovered. Authenticity isn't selfish. It's sacred, because the world doesn't need another copy of someone else's expectations. It needs your authentic contribution, your unique perspective, your truth. It needs what only you can give, but you can only give what you're willing to claim. But claiming your authentic self requires what Jung called moral courage, the willingness to stand alone if necessary, to trust your inner knowing, even when everyone else disagrees, to choose growth over comfort and truth over peace. This kind of courage isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet and persistent. It's the courage to keep choosing yourself even when yourself is evolving, even when that evolution disappoints people who preferred the old version. Emma began to understand that her anxiety hadn't been a problem to solve, but a message to receive. Her restlessness wasn't a character flaw, but her soul's way of saying she'd outgrown her current life. Her dissatisfaction wasn't pathology, but psychology, the natural result of living below her authentic potential. And slowly, as she made choice after choice in favor of her truth over her image, something miraculous happened. The knot in her stomach began to loosen. The 3 a.m. wake-ups became less frequent. The sense of living someone else's life began to fade. Emma was coming home to herself. And home, she discovered, was not a place but a practice, the daily practice of listening to her helpful animal and honoring what it told her. But you can only give what you're willing to claim. And claiming your authentic self is the most courageous thing you can do in a world that profits from your conformity. Learning to distinguish between true and false conscience isn't intellectual. It's embodied. It's felt. True conscience feels deep, steady quiet. It doesn't scream or threaten or shame. It simply knows. It has the quality of inevitability, not because it's demanding, but because it's true. False conscience is urgent, anxious, comparative. It's always worried about what others will think, always trying to prove something, always afraid of making the wrong choice. It speaks in the voice of your internalized critics, your inherited fears, your unexamined assumptions. Jung wrote, "All haste is of the devil." This isn't religious language, it's psychological wisdom. When you feel pressured to make a decision quickly, to respond before you've had time to feel into your own, knowing that pressure is usually coming from false conscience. True conscience has patience. It trusts your ability to discern. It knows that the right choice will reveal itself when you're ready to see it. Here's a practice Jung would have recognized. When facing a moral decision, don't think your way to the answer. Feel your way to it. Sit quietly. Put your hand on your chest. Present the decision to your body, not your mind. What does your nervous system tell you? Does one choice make you contract? Make you feel smaller? Make you hold your breath? Does another choice make you expand? Make you feel more like yourself? Make you breathe deeper? Your helpful animal doesn't speak in words. It speaks in sensations and energy, in the subtle felt sense of rightness or wrongness. This is how you learn to trust your inner voice again. Not by analyzing it, but by embodying it. Rebecca discovered this at 43 after decades of making decisions based on what looked good on paper. She was offered a promotion that would double her salary, but require her to move across the country, away from her aging parents, away from the community garden she'd spent 5 years building, away from the small, rooted life she'd finally learned to love. On paper, it was obvious. Take the promotion. More money, more prestige, more opportunities. Everyone told her she'd be crazy not to accept. But when Rebecca sat with the decision, really sat with it, her body told a different story. The thought of the promotion made her shoulders tense, her breathing shallow. It felt like wearing clothes that didn't fit. The thought of staying made her nervous. What would people think? Was she lacking ambition? But underneath the nervousness was something else. Relief, spaciousness, the sense of coming home to herself. She turned down the promotion. Some people called her crazy, but Rebecca had learned something more valuable than any salary increase: how to distinguish between what looks right and what feels right. Your helpful animal doesn't care about your resume. It cares about your soul. You don't need to please the world. You just need to not betray yourself. In a reality where every moral rule has its exception, where every piece of advice has its counter-advice, where every expert contradicts another expert, there's only one compass you can truly trust: your own authentic conscience. Not the voice of your conditioning, not the voice of your fears, not the voice of what you think you should want. The voice of what you actually know in your deepest knowing to be true for you. If you've been feeling lost, if you've been doing everything right, but still feeling wrong, if you've been successful but not satisfied, you might have been ignoring your helpful animal for too long. It's still there. It's been waiting. Jung believed that every symptom, every struggle, every crisis is actually your psyche's attempt to bring you back into alignment with yourself. Your anxiety isn't a disease, it's information. Your depression isn't a failure. It's a response to living out of integrity with your own truth. Listen to what your Carl Jung shadow is trying to tell you. Not the destructive impulses, but the authentic ones. The parts of yourself you've buried to fit in, to be loved, to be safe. They're not dangerous. They're you. Take some time this week. Sit quietly. Ask yourself, is there something inside me that's still whispering? Something I've been ignoring because it's inconvenient, because it would require change, because it would disappoint someone. Don't kill it for false peace. Listen to it. Honor it. Let it guide you back to yourself, because at the end of your life, you won't be judged by how well you followed everyone else's rules. You'll be judged by how faithfully you listen to your own voice. And that voice, it's been trying to save you all along. If this resonated with you, if you felt seen in these words, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person is permission to come home to themselves. The helpful animal is calling. It's time to listen.